What happens when two of Korea's most beloved stars seal their eternal love with a promise that moves millions to tears? IU and Lee Jong Suk's breathtaking vow has become a moment the world can't stop talking about. The air was electric, the emotions raw. Every gaze was fixed on them. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a living fairy tale unfolding before our eyes. Stay with Red Carpet revealed as we dive deep into every heart-stopping detail and uncover why this promise has shaken the world to its core. The city was dressed in winter's last embrace. The kind of February evening when the air carried the scent of snow and the stars seemed to lean closer. Curious to see what might happen below, Seoul's skyline shimmered like a sea of diamonds. But there was one place where the world's heartbeat felt slower. Enter, an ancient glass house tucked inside a hidden garden on Namsan Hill. It had been closed to the public for decades. It whispered among architects and poets. But tonight it glowed softly from within. Its arched windows spilling amber light into the darkness like an invitation from another century. Inside, hundreds of candles floated in shallow bowls along a mirrored floor, their flickering reflections creating the illusion of walking upon water. Towering branches of white orchids stood like frozen fireworks, petals trembling faintly in the gentle, heated air. Somewhere above, hidden speakers played a single piano note that lingered, long and aching, before giving way to a melody that was both tender and unfinished, an original composition Lee Jong Suk had written in secret over the past 6 months. IU stood at the far end of the glass house, her silhouette framed by the moonlight that poured through the domed ceiling. She wore no gown, no heavy makeup, just a soft winter coat in cream and her hair loose around her shoulders. Yet she looked as though she belonged to the light itself. Her eyes followed the sound of footsteps, steady, measured, drawing closer, and when Jong Suk appeared from the shadows, the way her lips curved into a smile said she had known all along he would find her here. He didn't speak at first. He simply stood before her, breath visible in the cool air, and let the silence weave around them like a spell. Then, with a faint smile, he reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather notebook. "You remember the first song we ever worked on together?" he asked, his voice low, steady but carrying an undertone of something restless. IU nodded. "The one you never finished," she said. "This is the ending," he replied, and handed her the notebook. Inside, instead of sheet music, there were words, lines upon lines, written in his familiar, slightly tilted handwriting. She read the first line aloud, her voice trembling. "When I have nothing left to give, I will still give you my forever." She looked up, eyes wide, just as the piano music swelled and the mirrored floor beneath them began to glow with a slow, blooming light. Jong Suk dropped to one knee. The reflection of his movement doubled in the water-like surface until it seemed the entire world bent before her. From his pocket, he drew a small box, not the polished kind from a jewelry store, but one carved from walnut, with tiny imperfections that made it feel alive. "I wrote this ending for our song," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring so delicate it seemed spun from moonlight. "But it only makes sense if I get to sing it with you. Every year, every wrinkle, every breath left in me, I choose you. You marry me." For a heartbeat, IU could only stare. The air was thick with the scent of orchids, the sound of the piano, and the muffled gasps of the handful of witnesses hidden behind the floral walls, friends who had been sworn to secrecy. Somewhere, a snowflake landed against the glass above them and slid slowly down, as if even winter itself refused to interrupt. She finally spoke. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Yes." The moment her answer left her lips, the lights in the glass house deepened to gold, and a hidden curtain at the far wall lifted to reveal the Seoul skyline, blazing in celebration. Jong Suk stood, slid the ring onto her finger, and for a moment they simply stood forehead to forehead, eyes closed, breathing the same air. No cameras, no red carpet, just two people holding the weight of forever between them. And yet, in the shadows, the story was already moving beyond them. The glass house doors would open in minutes, revealing the first official announcement to the small group of gathered press. By morning, their names would be on every screen from Seoul to New York. The proposal would not just be remembered, it would be replayed, analyzed, adored. But for now, they were still inside the music, the candles, the private world they had built with whispered promises. What they didn't yet know was that this was only the overture. The wedding that awaited them would make tonight feel like a gentle prologue, an event so breathtaking, so cinematic, that even the most jaded guests would find themselves on the edge of tears. But for tonight, in the quiet glass house on Namsan Hill, it belonged only to IU and Lee Jong Suk. The promise of eternal love they had just set into motion. The morning of their wedding dawned with a kind of clarity that felt like it had been ordered from the heavens themselves. The sky stretched out in an impossible shade of blue. Winter chill softened by a tender sunlight that danced over the Han River. The venue is a place whispered about in elite circles, a restored 19th century estate on Jeju Island, hidden deep within a grove of camellia trees that were, by some perfect coincidence, in full bloom despite the season. From the outside, the estate seemed timeless, pale stone walls weathered by salt and wind, arched windows that caught the light like antique mirrors. But inside, it had been transformed into something that could only be described as a living dream. The great hall was dressed in cascading wisteria, lilac and ivory blooms spilling from the ceiling in clouds, their scent mixing with the faintest trace of vanilla candles. A string quartet rehearsed quietly in one corner, the soft strains of Debussy's Clair de Lune floating over rows of seats dressed in silk and ivory. The guest list was small, by choice. Every face in the room was someone who had shaped, protected, or understood the couple's journey. Some were household names, their presence alone worth a dozen headlines. Others were lifelong friends who had never once spoken to the press. Each had been asked to leave phones and cameras at the door. Today would live only in memory, not in pixels. Behind a set of carved oak doors, IU stood in the bridal suite, gazing at her reflection in a full-length mirror. The gown was unlike anything she had ever worn on stage, minimalist, yet rich with detail visible only up close. The bodice, cut from whisper-thin silk, was embroidered with a constellation of tiny pearls that caught the light each time she moved, while the skirt flowed in layers of organza so fine they seemed to breathe. Her hair was swept into a loose chignon, few strands framing her face, and on her wrist, she wore a delicate silver bracelet Jong Suk had given her on their first anniversary. Her stylist fussed over the hem. IU's attention was elsewhere, on the steady beat of her heart, on the sound of muffled laughter drifting in from the courtyard, and on the knowledge that beyond those doors, he was waiting. Lee Jong Suk, in a tailored three-piece suit of deep midnight blue, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, talking quietly with his best friend. His tie was the exact shade of her eyes under stage lights, a detail he'd insisted on, though no one else would notice. The music shifted. The doors opened. In that instant, every sound in the room seemed to fade, leaving only the rhythmic echo of IU's footsteps on the polished stone floor. She didn't look at the guests. Eyes found Jong Suk's, and the world narrowed to that one line of sight, a thread between them as fragile and unbreakable as spun glass. When she reached him, the officiant, a close family friend, smiled warmly and began to speak. But it was the vows that held the room in a breathless hush. Jong Suk went first. "The world will tell you that love is a feeling," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Learned it's a decision, one you make over and over, even when it's hard, even when the music fades. IU promise to choose you in every lifetime, in every storm, and in every quiet morning we're given." Then it was her turn. IU's voice was soft but certain. "When I sing for the world. But when I'm with you, I sing for one person. You've been my anchor when the wind rose, my shelter when the lights went out, and in every season of our lives, I promise to keep finding you, even in the dark." A tear slipped down her cheek, and without hesitation, Jong Suk reached up to wipe it away. The guests, hardened industry veterans, skeptical journalists, even a few political dignitaries, found themselves unexpectedly moved, their own eyes shimmering. The rings were exchanged, his, a simple band of brushed gold, hers, moonlight ring from the glass house, now paired with a slender gold band that nestled against it like the final note of a song. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Jong Suk didn't wait, he pulled her close, and their kiss was unhurried, deep, the kind that made time falter and the air feel electric. All erupted in applause. But it was the reception that turned the day into legend. Outside, the courtyard had been strung with thousands of fairy lights, their glow reflecting off the camellia petals scattered along the stone paths. Guests dined beneath the open sky on dishes inspired by the couple's favorite meals, from late-night ramen to fine French cuisine. Each plate served with a handwritten note explaining its place in their story. As the evening deepened, IU took the microphone. "This isn't a performance," she said, her voice carrying softly through the warm night. "This is a thank you to everyone who's walked with us to this moment. And to you, Jong Suk, for making my life the most beautiful song I've ever sung." She began to sing, just one song, written for this night, her voice as pure as the starlight overhead. By the time she finished, Jong Suk's hand was over his mouth, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Later, long after the guests had left and the estate had fallen into hush, they walked together through the camellia grove, crunching softly underfoot. "Do you realize," Jong Suk murmured, "that tomorrow the world will belong to us in a different way?" Smiled, leaning into his side. "Let them have tomorrow," whispered. "Tonight is ours." And under the quiet canopy of blooming camellias, the sea murmuring in the distance, they sealed the day, not with a grand spectacle that had defined it, but with the simplest truth of all: two people, one promise, forever. As the last lantern flickered against the Jeju night and the camellia petals settled into the stillness, it felt as though the entire island was holding its breath. Where in the quiet, the echo of their vows lingered, Lee Jong Suk's steady promise, IU's gentle declaration, woven into the sea breeze like a melody that would never fade. The estate now stood empty. The air was thick with the warmth of shared laughter, the shimmer of tears, and the kind of love that makes even strangers feel like witnesses to history. For those who had been there, more than a wedding, it was a living proof that fairy tales could step down from the page and walk among us. For those who would hear about it tomorrow, a story told in gasps and sighs, replayed in the mind's eye until it felt like a dream one had been lucky enough to see. Us, it's a reminder that somewhere out there, under a sky dusted with stars, two people keep a promise that shook the world. Thank you for joining us in this unforgettable moment. Until the next story unfolds, take care, and we'll see you in the next video.